I want to say something briefly about because I mentioned Giannis, right? And I was listening yesterday to The Odd Couple. That's Rob Parker now, and it's Rob Parker, and now it's Kelvin Watson. It used to be Chris Broussard. But they were saying, well, because obviously Giannis has also been linked to the Spurs. Spurs obviously have the number two pick and all these assets. So you already have until you have Wemby, you have De'Aaron Fox, you have Stephon Castle, who just won the Rookie of the Year, and you have Devin Vassell, you have Keldon Johnson, you have Jeremy Sohan. You got a lot of nice pieces there, and now they have the number two pick in the draft, right? And you look at it, and I look at it, I feel like they have a gluttony of. You don't need Fox. Of course, the number two pick in the draft, or I should say the number two ranked prospect in the draft is by consensus is Dylan Harper, Ron Harper's son, the kid out of Rutgers, right? Um, it goes Flag and then Harper and then Bailey, and I think it's pretty much set in stone, right? And so, kind of like if it's a situation where, let's say the Spurs say, well, we already have enough guards, right? But an Ace Bailey, right? Who's a really talented wing. Uh, but they probably wouldn't take Ace Bailey second. They would probably trade the pick down. They would probably, or they would swap picks with, or they would take um, they would take Harper and trade him for who has the third pick? It's Philly, right? But Philly doesn't need Harper either. But however it worked, it's like when in '94, right? When the was it '94? Was it 93? When the Magic had the number one pick and they took Chris Webber and then traded him to Golden State, who had the second pick, for Penny Hardaway, right? Now, why didn't the Magic just take Penny Hardaway with the first overall pick? Right? Because because Chris Webber was obviously the that's a conversation all on its own. It's like, why do teams do that? It's like if one guy is like the consensus number one prospect, but he's like it'd be a better fit to take somebody else instead of just taking the other guy with the first overall pick. They'll take the other guy and then trade with the other team. But instead of just taking Penny over number one overall, they said no, we'll take Weber and then just trade him to to Golden State. It's silly when you think about it, but that's how they do it. And so I think that, like I said, man, you can say whatever you want. I saw the write up about it about what do you call it? The Spurs. It seems like the Spurs are just going to take the best player available in Harper. Who Harper profiles as like a James Harden type. 6'6", left-handed. Big guard who can do a lot of different things, right? But like I said, you don't need Fox and Castle and Dylan Harper. That's a logjam at that guard position. So now, and I also think that Ace Bailey, though, I think Ace Bailey would not. I don't think Dylan Harper would. Those two guys went to Rutgers. Who the hell goes to Rutgers to play basketball? They basically went to Rutgers because they know if they went to Rutgers, they could just do whatever they wanted to do, right? And the Rutgers went like I don't know what their record was. I don't even think they finished 500. If they did, it was maybe 500 or barely over 500. They were not good, right? So they basically just went there because, well, we had to do something for a year before we went to the league. Let's go to Rutgers and do whatever we want to do, right? And so now that's not the type of people that the Spurs have. The Spurs have winning players with winning mentality and team mentality, right? So that going back to Giannis, is that a situation where uh, the Spurs, um, package that pick and maybe a couple of those other assets I said and some other picks and make the move for Giannis? I don't know. Or do you just try to, uh, maybe, deal the pick in some other way for some other pieces and uh, just try to win more, a little bit more organically than adding such a huge piece like a Giannis, you know? Um, like I said, bro, Giannis is such a huge piece that he just changes the very makeup of your team, you know. And like I said, but I don't know if Giannis I don't think that his game. When I say his game is not aging well, I don't mean that in the sense of how Galvez used to talk about Blake Griffin, right? Like Galvez used to say, well, Blake Griffin, because his game is so much based on athleticism that once he hits, 30, his game is not gonna. I don't mean it like that. I meant in terms of uh, the it's the way that the game is just constantly moving more and more towards 3-point shooting and guards and wings, dominating somebody like Giannis who doesn't shoot threes and gets all his stuff in the paint. It's like he's sort of becoming outdated in that sense. Not that he still is. I think Giannis Giannis is like a LeBron or a Westbrook, that type of. And Blake Griffin was too, is a freak of nature athlete, but the injuries took a toll on Blake Griffin. And by the time he was 30, he wasn't the same, guy anymore. Um, but Giannis seems like one of those guys, like a LeBron or a Westbrook. I always remember when the guy, Custer Legend, said about Steve Smith, number 89, Smitty will never be washed, right? Steve Smith was just one of those athletes who, he's always going to be able to do what he does. And I think that Giannis is one of those guys too, probably. One of those super freak athletes like that, who's always going to be able to, be one of the best athletes on the court. But I think as far as, the way that the direction of the game continues to move, that maybe Giannis is not the asset that he would have been 5 years ago, right?